In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, you will learn when, how, and why the PMP exam is changing in 2018.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I am Cornelius Fichtner. We are coming to you live from the magnificent 2017 PMI Global Conference in Chicago. And with me right now is Simona Falavalita. Good morning, Simona. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me here, Cornelius.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. How is the conference going for you so far?
It's been wonderful. A great opportunity to meet with lots of practitioners, experience new educational sessions. So overall, been great.
Yeah. How do you think the energy is at this conference compared to last year?
I think there's been a great energy. I think everyone's been excited about new things changing at PMI, definitely more agile influence coming in with PMI. So definitely a buzz about the conference, which is always good to see.
One thing that I noticed this year is I'm a baby boomer, so I'm on the older generation. There seem to be a lot of younger presenters and younger attendees here. And we're not just talking, Generation Y. I'm talking millennials, right, in their early 20s.
How wonderful, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's very exciting to see the younger generation embracing project management and getting into the profession.
Yeah. So please do remind us, what is your role within PMI?
So I am the product manager for the PMP certification, as well as our CCR program.
Okay, how does that relate to the changes that are coming to the PMP exam in early 2018?
So as the product manager, I oversee the general commercialization of the PMP product, and one of the key responsibilities is ensuring that the PMP remains relevant to the profession and reflective of what's happening in current project management world and practices that are going on.
Right, so you're more involved with the role delineation study then, on that side?
Yes, I am a little bit more involved with the role delineation side, but when it comes to updates to the PMBOK guide, I help to ensure that those are infused into the current version of the PMP exam.
Okay, and that's what's happening right now, right? The PMBOK guide was updated, and that's where the changes are coming from.
Correct. So recently we released the new version of the PMBOK guide, the 6th edition. So with the release of the new version, what we do is we go through a process to try to harmonize some of the changes made within the PMBOK guide to the PMP exam.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when exactly is the exam changing?
The PMP exam will be changing March 26th, 2018. So everything before that point will refer to the PMP and the 5th edition of the PMBOK guide. Mm-hmm. As of March 26th and after, the PMP will be referenced to the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide.
Okay. And let's quickly talk about these two documents that we mentioned, the PMBOK guide and also the role delineation study. Where do these fit into the picture for the PMP exam?
Sure. That's a great question and often one that is misunderstood. So the role delineation study and the exam content outline is really the blueprint for the PMP exam. We go through an extensive research study, the role delineation study, to really define the role of a project manager, what their responsibilities are, the tasks they'll conduct as a project manager, and it defines what will be on the actual exam itself. In contrast, the PMBOK guide is one of the references we utilize to develop exam questions for the PMP exam. So it's only one of the references we use. We use many references to help validate the questions on the PMP exam. So the PMP exam, it's not a test of the PMBOK guide, but we certainly use it because we know it's a valuable resource that contains common practices, best practices in project management.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in other words, the exam content outline says you will be tested about planning on your PMP exam, and in many cases, questions on the PMP exam are the correct answer may be found in the PMBOK guide.
Correct. So the exam content outline is always a source of truth in regards to the topics and concepts that will be on the PMP exam. Some of those might be referenced in the PMBOK guide. Some of them may not. But certainly all the concepts and all the material within the PMBOK guide won't necessarily appear within the PMP exam.
Mm-hmm. Is there some sort of a grace period for those students who use the PMBOK guide 5th edition right now and who for some reason fail to take the test before the 26th of March?
So we do not have a grace period when it comes to which version of the exam you test on. What we try to do instead is give people notice far in advance. In this case, it was about 7 months that when we announced the change of the PMBOK guide on March 26th. So knowing that we don't know with every single person testing which version of the PMBOK guide they were referring to, we try to just put up front as early as possible what the date is so people can act accordingly.
Yes, and I'm trying to help by doing this interview here
which
and
we
getting
very much
it out
appreciate.
to my students and our listeners as well. Let's look at what it is that will change in March. Will any of the prerequisites to become a PMP change?
No, all the prerequisites in terms of work experience, in terms of contact hours, those will all remain the same.
Okay. Will the number of questions on the exam change, or is the 4-hour duration changing?
Nope, that will all be the same as well.
Okay, then so what exactly is changing in March?
So what we'll be changing is, what we'll be doing is trying to harmonize the content and align some of the major changes that happened in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition compared to the 5th edition, and infuse those changes into the new version of the PMP exam.
Okay, can you give me an example of what that means? So what might a candidate be asked after the 26th, and how would that differ from before and after?
Sure, absolutely. So some of those key changes that might occur between versions of the PMBOK guide, it could be changes in terminology, maybe slight shifts in process groups. So for example, one of the changes that happened was in the 5th edition of the PMBOK guide, it referred to stakeholder management. In the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide, it's stakeholder engagement. So what we're doing with the PMP exam is ensuring that we use those same terms within the PMP exam. So starting on March 26th, instead of seeing stakeholder management plans, you'll start to see stakeholder engagement.
Okay, and it's the same with human resources. In the 5th edition and in the 6th edition, it's resource management. It's been expanded to
Correct.
that. If you had to qualify what happens in March, would you say this is a small change to the exam, a medium change, a big change, extra large?
I'd probably classify it as a medium, because although it might seem small in terms of harmonizing content, in terms of terminology, any major shifts, I do realize from the user perspective, the person studying for the PMP exam, that some small shift like that might be a bigger challenge for them because they've spent endless hours studying. Another challenge on top of that to maybe shift their thinking when it comes to terminology maybe is a little bit more difficult for them and impactful for them. So although it might seem like smaller changes, I do appreciate how from the person studying for the exam, having to think about and memorize new concepts, new terms is more challenging for them. So I'd probably categorize it as a medium.
Okay. Also, I believe there are a couple new processes that have been added to the PMBOK guide, which means today there are probably no questions about these processes. Or if there are questions about these processes, the PMBOK guide is not the official reference for the answer. Yet after March 26th, that particular question will probably now use the PMBOK guide as the official reference to identify the correct answer.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. What do you think is the biggest misconception that candidates have about the PMP exam?
So I think by far the biggest misconception is that people believe that the PMP is a test of the PMBOK guide and they need to memorize the PMBOK guide in order to pass the PMP. And that is absolutely not the case. As I said before, the PMBOK guide is one of the many references we use to validate the exam questions on the PMP exam, but it's only one of the references. And with the PMP exam, we're really looking to ensure that people it's testing practical experience, situations and scenarios that people may encounter in project management. It's not just making sure they know what the term work breakdown structure means. So it's really more putting people into and helping to assess the role of project management versus just knowledge of project management. That's what the CAPM exam is. CAPM is a test of the PMBOK guide. The PMP exam really looks to assess your abilities when it comes to being a project manager.
Mm-hmm. The PMBOK Guide 6th edition was released together with the new Agile Practice Guide. And as it just so happens, the PMP exam is changing on the 26th of March, so is the PMI ACP exam. How do these two exams differ in terms of the target audience we're talking about?
Sure. They are geared at two different audiences, although certainly many people have both the PMP and the PMI ACP certifications. The PMP is really for the role of project manager, whatever type of project manager you may be. So it covers the larger breadth of project management. Whereas the ACP exam and certification is much deeper into the practice of Agile. It goes much deeper into Agile concepts and methodologies.
Mm-hmm. Yet in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, there are sections about considerations for Agile environments. So how much Agile does a aspiring PMP have to know in order to, feel well prepared for the new exam after March 26th?
I think the aspiring PMP candidates, certainly it is helpful to know something about Agile. The references in the new version of the PMBOK guide are useful, but by no means do we expect people to be experts in Agile practices when they're sitting for the PMP exam. So the exam content outline is still the source of truth when it comes to the PMP exam. And is there a possibility that there could be some Agile questions on the PMP exam if they fit into the current version of the PMP exam content outline? Sure. But people certainly should not expect to see half of the exam now on Agile practices. That is not the case. Maybe a question or two here or there, but by no means will it be now a large focus on Agile within the PMP exam. I think over time that might evolve, though.
Yeah. And I think I could have asked exactly the same question about, earned value, the work breakdown structure, customer engagement. A PMP has to be well-rounded and has to know a little bit about a lot of topics and has to have a lot of experience in it in order to pass the exam.
Correct. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So since a lot of Agile concepts have been added into the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, are there any plans to merge the Agile Practice Guide right into the PMBOK Guide into the future?
I don't think in the foreseeable future that the two books will be merged. The Agile Practice Guide is much more a how-to approach when it comes to Agile, whereas our standards in the PMBOK Guide are more the what is. So I think they're serving two different needs at this point, but I think as you'll see in the new version, the 6th edition of the PMBOK Guide, we are starting to incorporate small elements of Agile, and then when you want to go deeper, we'll point you to the Agile Practice Guide for more information.
Okay. So more and more Agile is, and I'm using this word lovingly, creeping into the PMBOK Guide, and more Agile is being added to the PMP exam as well. Now, does this mean that maybe at some point the ACP and the PMP are going to be the same exam?
Again, I don't think in the short term we will see that. There's no plans for that at this point in time, because as we mentioned earlier, they are for two different audiences, two different purposes for them. But what I think will happen over time is when we go through the process of reevaluating the PMP exam, going through the next role delineation study, we'll probably look to see how much Agile should be incorporated into the PMP exam and how much every project manager should be expected to know about Agile. There will always still be the need for people to have much deeper experience in Agile, but the everyday practitioner might not necessarily need full experience and knowledge and deep concepts in Agile.
Yeah, it's just like the scheduling professional or the risk management professional. Nobody asks, well, are you going to integrate this back into the PMP exam, because they are for a separate target audience.
Yes.
Yeah. The CAPM exam can now be taken at home. So instead of going to the testing center, you're taking the exam at home, but you're supervised through your webcam. Are there any plans for the PMP exam in the future to go down this road?
At this point in time, there's not. We're certainly testing it out with CAPM, see how it's going. Overall, so far, it's going very well. But as we see how that evolves and over time, maybe down the road it'll happen, but at this point, there's no plans for that.
Mm-hmm. Let's also not forget about the PMI talent triangle. Can you please tell us what is it, and does it have any influence on the PMP exam at all?
Sure. So the PMI talent triangle represents the ideal skill set of project practitioners. It's a combination of technical skills, technical project management skills, of business and strategy skills, as well as leadership skills. So that is what the talent triangle is. In terms of the influence on the PMP exam, obviously the biggest focus is the technical side of that on the exam, but there has been of late, especially with the last role delineation study, more of the leadership and strategy influence coming into the PMP exam. For example, there was understanding the benefits realization and benefits of a project and connecting that to why you're doing the project. That goes back into more of the connecting it with strategy. So we're connecting more of those elements within the PMP exam.
And obviously the talent triangle has a big influence on those who are PMP certified, because once you are PMP certified, you have to earn PDUs, and they fall into these various categories of the talent triangle. But that's the discussion that we had with John Klein, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the PMP exam. Let's take a look at a few numbers. How many certified PMPs are there in the world?
Currently, there are over 802,000 actively certified PMPs globally.
Wow. And how many more are taking the exam on a sort of daily, weekly, monthly basis, if you can tell us that?
I don't know the exact number, but I think it probably ranges in the several hundred range, upwards of 500 or so a day that are taking the PMP exam. Yeah. So we have people testing around the world all the time, hoping to become PMP certified.
Somebody sitting at the exam center right now taking their exam.
That there are.
That is, wow, exciting to know. How do these numbers compare with the other exams?
Certainly PMP is our largest by far. However, we have had great success with our other certifications, in particular the PMI ACP exam. Agile has been our fastest growing certification since its release. We have close to 18,000 Agile certified practitioners right now. And the CAPM is also one that has been growing more and more over time. I believe we're in the upwards of 30,000 CAPM certification holders.
Are there any other significant PMP numbers that we should mention?
There are a couple that are always good to mention here. One is just around the project management profession in general. The project management profession is growing and offers outstanding opportunities for jobs with great salaries. Recent research that PMI has done has indicated that through 2027, the project management-oriented labor force in a couple different sectors is expected to grow by 33%, or creating nearly 22 million new jobs. So that's great potential in terms of the project management profession. And then another great stat is project managers who earn the PMP certification enjoy significant advantage in terms of salary and earning potential compared to their non-certified counterparts. According to PMI's recently released Earning Power Project Management Salary Survey 9th edition, those people who hold the PMP certification have a higher salary, upwards of 20%, than their non-certified peers. So again, a significant advantage for earning the PMP.
I have to tell my boss that I need a raise. Oh wait, I am my own boss. That's not going to work. We've heard earlier that the PMP exam content outline is not really changing, and that's truly what the PMP exam is based upon. What are PMI's plans in regards of the date for doing a new RDS?
Typically what we've done is every 3 to 5 years, we look to do the role delineation study, the research study, to update the exam content outline. So we're still planning to look to follow that process. So I would expect within the next year or two, we'll probably begin that process and see what the new exam content outline for the PMP will be in the future.
So sometime in the early 20s then is when the exam might see another change based on the RDS.
Roughly around there. We don't have a specific date yet, but certainly when we do know that, it will be published and we'll let everyone know.
Okay. What are your final recommendations to our listeners out there who are currently studying for their PMP exam?
I think one recommendation would be knowing the amount of time and effort people put into studying for the PMP exam, because they know how much value the PMP exam or being PMP certified can bring them. We know it's a stressful situation. There's a lot of time invested. With the change to the PMP exam, I would certainly try to tell people, if you've already been studying under the 5th edition of the PMBOK guide, try to test before March 26th, just to make it one less thing to worry about. If you are interested and you haven't started your testing process, you should probably start looking at the 6th edition when you're going to test.
All right. Simona, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.